Hey folks, welcome back to our Sandbox Paleozoo build in Jurassic World Evolution 3. Today we're going to build a small dinosaur aviary inspired by the sort of thing you'd see birds and monkeys in a usual zoo. It was actually a pretty tough build, this one, and just like the last one, I scrapped an initial design after maybe an hour or so of work. But sometimes the juice is worth the squeeze, and I think we ended up with something pretty. So this is micro mana for our new Microceratus arrivals. Initially it was something else, as you'll see. And as with the last video, if you want to leave some name suggestions, you can do so via the Google form linked in the description of the video down below. Do not use the comment section. I will not be using suggestions from the comment section. And thank you all for the literally hundreds of Psittacosaurus name suggestions. We're going to be meeting all of those with their brand new names at the end of the video. Let's get building. Okay then, here we go. So we're going to build our dinosaur aviary sort of thing. And I really like the idea of it kind of splitting the path in two, so you can kind of see a different angle of it from different sides as well. One thing you won't see built during this part of the video is I spent a little time earlier in the week making a restroom. You're going to see it at the end of the video, you might have already seen it a little bit. I spent a little bit of time making a restroom that was sort of Elderwood appropriate, one that we can kind of drop in as a blueprint throughout the park, basically. So that's kind of how I'm going to tackle the buildings, in that like every week I'm going to make myself make one building, like the little sort of amenity ones and the guest ones, and then we can throw them in the park and eventually we'll have them all and they can all sit together. I don't really want to, you know, eventually we might do like a big custom building for sure, you know, I'm sure we will. I've got a couple of ideas, but in the meantime for the little ones, it kind of fits the vibe a little bit more that they are on their own and sort of a little rustic and casual in that sort of way. Thank you to everyone who told me about the glass. I was lamenting in the last video how there was no glass option in this game. I do think it's silly that we don't have a straight up proper glass wall just like this, but by using the skylight, you can rotate the skylights and turn them essentially into walls, and it works pretty bloody well. So whilst I hope we get more options, and I've got some stuff to talk about that throughout this video, I do think it's pretty great, and was a big part of what I wanted to do for this build, which is very much have a outdoor aviary, but also again an inside area for the dinosaurs, which would have this kind of segmented glass viewing area sort of shebang. Now what I've done is I've kind of kept the first, there's a restroom there, I've kept the first 10 minutes in pretty much straight all the way through, but sped it up a little bit, just so you can see the formation of the building all included in the video, and then when it comes to the detailing we'll start to skip around just a little bit like we do in the other videos. But this was, it was a rough one. I knew I wanted to do an aviary. That was kind of in my mind from the very get-go. I wanted to do one more small dinosaur exhibit before we did something big for the next video. And a lot of it was just, you know, what's that going to look like? What's the theme for the area going to be? Am I going to do it based on error? Am I going to do types of dinosaur, types of creature and stuff like that? And I thought, what I'm going to do is theme it roughly around habitat, because if you theme around habitat, you can then theme the sort of the zoo around it as well. Apologies if you hear the dog going absolutely bonkers outside. It is not part of the build. So I like the idea of having this sort of conifer, spruce forest sort of thing, and I'm going to try to pick creatures that would have lived in that sort of environment. I've got 3 or 4 in mind in particular that will be contained within this section. And, you know, we might not do all of this right now. We might jump to another section and just kind of develop them over time. Yes, I was going to complain about choices. For some reason, and like I ran into this a few times when doing this build, which by the way was about 3 hours. I think it's helpful to tell you folks how long I spend on a build. Just so you've got an idea of how long it might take you to build something similar. Now that was 3 hours. We're probably about an hour of faffing around and working on other parts of the park. You know, I did some other things, sort of tidy some things up, as you'll see later on in the video. But, you know, maybe 2.5 hours for the actual aviary construction. And a lot of it is just working things out. I made the terrible mistake of not really building this on the grid. So fairly often I would shuffle something along and would end up with this problem wherein, you know, things were just completely out of place and had to be realigned. I probably would have saved myself half an hour if I'd gridded things up properly, as they say in the clubs, but I didn't pull a griddy, as they also say in the clubs. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, so there's a lot of walls in this game, and the walls are not all the same shape. There's one in particular I wanted to use. You'll have seen it earlier on, the stone one, but I wanted that in wood. This kind of tall... Got interrupted there. So hopefully I remember what I was saying. Yes, so there's some walls, and they're just... They're there. They've got this cool shape. They've got this kind of archway. It was made of stone. I was going to use it, but I wanted it in wood, but... It exists in stone, but it doesn't exist in wood. There's quite a few ones like that that just don't quite have all the textures available. There's a real problem in that we don't have the little triangles that sit in the roof gaps, unless I'm crazy. So if you have a small... Oh, I've just punched my mic, I apologise. If you have a small sloped roof and a small sloped roof and they meet in the middle to make like a triangle, if it's big enough, you've got the thin triangular... right angle triangles and you can fit it in. But if the roof isn't that big, we don't have those small little pieces anymore, that the little full triangles that used to sit in the middle. Do you know what I mean? I know what I mean. Either way, they don't exist in the game at all, and it's a real problem when it comes to building roofs on buildings. So hopefully these are things that are going to get updated and looked at, because these are just fairly basic rudimentary building materials that we should definitely have access to, and were present in Planet Zoo. So I don't expect everything from Planet Zoo to make it over, but I would like to see more stuff make it over. But really just the fundamental stuff, you know, glass walls and these little roof pieces and stuff like that would be fan-dabby-doozy. That's all I've got to complain about today. It's just that as I play the game, you know, I pick up on things, and, you know, if things become more noticeable, the more experience you have with the modular building, things that are missing, and little bugbears and stuff like that. Overall, still very much enjoying the process, however. I'm really enjoying the game in a way that I haven't for a very long time. I thanked people for letting me know about the glass. I should also mention, thank you very much for letting me know about the scaling. So if you go to place a scalable item and you hold down the B key, I don't know how you do it on console, and it isn't listed in the hotkeys at all, as in the ones on the screen. But if you hold down B, you can actively scale. You'll see me doing it here probably. So that's rotation. There you go, just a little bit of scaling. Whenever you see that blue circle, that means I'm actively scaling it. Not going into advanced tools and going up to scale, but just holding B and then moving my mouse to scale the item. Incredible time saver. Absolutely incredible. Now, I told Frontier to add this when I played the game in London. This was one of the pieces that, like, they came, you know, and asked for suggestions, you know, what's my experience like? And one of the things I said was, we need to be able to scale as we place the item down. Because it still isn't listed in the hotkey, I don't know if they listened or if it was already in the game and nobody really knew about it, but it needs to be listed somewhere, of course, on the screen. But it's... God, is it a time saver. So I'm very glad to have that in the game. And again, thank you to whoever it was who told me about that, because I used it about 5,000 times in the process of this build. Genuinely, I put water in the exhibit. I want all my... Look, the exhibit is tiny. It is not big enough, even for Microceratus, it is not big enough for them to be, like, super duper happy, right? But I want them to have the food and the water that they require, which means even the tiny ass exhibits like this need a water source. And unfortunately, because the water brush is so huge, even in its smallest level, it's very hard to put down little amounts of water, so I inevitably did a little bit of damage to the surrounding terrain. I don't think it's a big deal. One thing I really want to play with, and that we haven't at all so far, is a bit of verticality, a bit of height. You know, this game is so much better at handling that than the past games were. You know, we can build big ramps and stuff, so I don't super know how I'm going to integrate that into this build at this point in time, but it's definitely something that I've got under consideration, because I think it makes the zoo feel a lot more interesting. It's very easy to just build flat and kind of just get into that mindset, but building cliffs, building ramps, building stuff like that is a big deal. And obviously, as we get further into the build, things are going to open up more and more and more. I just kind of wanted to start with some smaller stuff, some more classic zoo stuff. You know, this is stuff I would build in Planet Zoo, basically, but it just happens to have a dinosaur in it. So I think as we go along, things will scale up a little bit, maybe get a little bit more Jurassic, a little bit more dinosaur-centered in some ways. But, yeah. That is the plan. So the next build, as I say, is going to be bigger. It's going to be bigger. It's going to be bigger. That's all you're getting. But it's gonna. I don't really have a great plan, but I know what dinosaur is going to be, and maybe we'll integrate some verticality in that as well, because I'd like to start playing around with that just a little bit more. So doing what I talked about there in the last video. So I'm just doing a roof. This building isn't really anything. You could say it's a storage area or like a little veterinary thing for the dinosaurs that live in this habitat. But I just wanted a building there to have a little sort of back wall to the aviary essentially and make it look a little bit nicer. Nice little sloped roof on there. And I struggled with this roof for a really long time. You'll see I've got some corrugated steel around there. It looks terrible. I made it a little bit haphazard, a little bit ramshackle to kind of tie in with the themes we're going for, but it just doesn't look very good. So swapping it to this grass flooring was really, really helpful, because then I can put a little bit of plant life on top. Again, that ties into the sort of natural theme we're going for with the build, and also means I didn't have to make a super neat roof, basically, because the grass has kind of covered everything up. I was really struggling to come up with a good idea for this roof section, because I wanted a little bit of height. Flat roofs tend to, they look unfinished inherently, I think, so by putting the grass in, layering up a little bit, that's me deleting the corrugated, layering it up a little bit above the roof, and then putting some plant life on it, it just gives this nice little bit of verticality. And it's the verticality in the little corner details and stuff like that that make buildings go from boxes to actually looking like real viable buildings, which I know is probably, yeah, from what people have told me, maybe the thing people struggle with most in this game, more than anything else, and even the other games, is exhibits and buildings just looking like boxes, because we naturally build squares. That's how we like to build. And you think of a house, you probably think of a square, really. But most houses aren't. Most houses have little nooks and crannies and little weird bits, and it's crazy. I mean, I really like the shape of this. You know, it's square at one side, and then it turns into this kind of like pentagon there, but then there's like a jutting out building at the back end. You know, it's got some interesting sort of angles to it that make it look more realistic, basically. Make it look more naturalistic, make it more look realistic. Less like a box, basically. I don't know why I went for the gravel here. In retrospect, I'm not sure it really works, but I've gone for gravel anyway, just to mix things up a little bit. I like all my builds in an area to be thematic, tied in together. So all the buildings in the conifer area are going to have some sort of materials in common. But it's also important for then there to be I don't want to call it a unique selling point, but almost a unique selling point. Like it's an individual material or plant or something that makes that building and makes that exhibit different from the others. So you want 90% of it to sort of use the same materials and stuff, so they tie together thematically, and you know, it feels like a coherent part of your park. But then you want a hero item that sticks out a little bit, looks a little bit different. So the grass roof to an extent with this, the chain link, the gravel, all of those are things that won't necessarily be replicated that often, and therefore they make the aviary just feel a little bit different, even if the stone and the wood and the corrugated roof and all that are sort of replicated materials. You see what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying? The thyme bush. God, I love the thyme bush. I am never building a tropical park because that would mean losing my beloved thyme bush, because it just isn't appropriate. I decided to redo the path just to make it completely align with the planter. Actually, the planter sticks out just a little bit, which again I think tends to feel a little bit more realistic in general. But that meant, of course, moving all my benches. One thing I need to do, I've got it under consideration. I don't know what it's gonna. I don't think the game is super well made to do this, especially on a small scale. But I need little things at the side, you know, little displays. I want to do info boards and stuff, but it's very difficult to do in this game because you just can't scale text very small at all, and you can't write text, and we don't have like custom written out signs. I would love to have some signs that we can just type into. That would be fantastic, but we don't have that right now. So doing info boards and stuff is very difficult, and maps. I did search on the workshop I shall see later, to see if anyone had made a map. Nobody's made a map, because how the heck can you make a map that's a good size in this game? You just can't do it. So there's little things like that we still need, but minor details. So this was the Dryodon. This was going to be a Dryosaurus habitat originally, and I maybe under what's the word? under I can't remember what the term is. I feel very stupid. Undersold, I guess, how small the exhibit is, and undersold how big Dryosaurus is. relatively speaking. You'll see I've done a little symbol on the door there. It doesn't really mean anything at this point in time. It's just one of the default decals. I just wanted a little detail on there because I think it looks nice. But I'm going to do a custom symbol decal, and that will be something to do with the cult. So I'm gonna I like the idea of it being very subtle at the start throughout the park, where the idea is very much that Elderwood existed as a park or something, or the dinosaurs were roaming here naturally, and someone came and set a park up in the area. You know what I mean? So cultures and people existed in this area before we came and built on top of it, and maybe those people are still here. Maybe they haven't been displaced. Even though the park owners were evil and tried to do so. It was very much John Hammond with the people on Isla Sorna. Nublar? Was it Nublar? It was Nublar. With the people on Isla Nublar, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you need to play Jurassic Park the game. But it's, maybe they're still here, and maybe they're leaving symbols, and maybe they're leaving little things behind that suggest they're not thrilled with the situation. And maybe that's something we'll develop as we go through. It's all very much spitballing it right now. Nothing is really planned or thought out, but I'm going to do a custom one. A little decal that I can just engrave here and there. So as you were walking through, especially at the start of the park, you might not even notice anything's awry at all. There's a few little bits that are a little bit overgrown and maybe a little bit more ramshackle than you'd expect. Little hints of deterioration. And if you're really paying attention, you might see these signs etched into kind of like migrants is not really the word I wanted. Ramblers, homeless people who travel around. And they etch into wooden posts, and they etch like a certain thing, like person here is a thief, or person here has good food, or person here will let you do a day's work, and stuff like that. It was in Mad Men. So it's not really a thing over here, but I believe it's a thing in parts of the US anyway. So it's kind of like that, but for a cult, essentially. And they're just leaving little marks, telling each other they're here and that they will not be going quietly into that dark night. There's something there. I'm not going to go too hard on it, at least not for a while. Anyway, so my Dryasauruses, you may have just seen it. I'm just going to nip back so you can see it. The Microceratus have already appeared. I did cut this bit pretty quickly. That was the Dryasauruses. Actually, that's micro. But the Dryosaurus just didn't fit, basically, so I cut that out. They just did not fit. And I was having, this is after I've moved a lot of stuff, even with collision turned off, the part of the problem was the Dryosaurus didn't have anywhere to go. They seemed to be stuck completely in the middle of the exhibit. So I went through and I deleted a lot of the foliage in this middle part of the exhibit. I don't know what is causing this square. This 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This octagon over here. No idea what that's about. There's nothing there. It's just this weird octagon, but it just sits there, breaking the territory. But I made sure collision was off. I moved all the plant life. You see me doing it here. I'm moving some of the thyme bushes out of the middle, just so there's enough room. Oh, it was one of the bushes actually. Was the octagon. Just so there's room for them to move about. It's not a huge exhibit, but I think for 3 micros, which is all there is at the moment, I think it's more than suitable size-wise. I don't think it's too small for 3 dinosaurs of that size. The game thinks it is, but that's fair enough. And I would, ideally, I think I've got a little bit too much Planet Zoo brain, so I need to, this was me tabbing out by the way, trying to find a word that began with M. It's not really a manor, but it begins with M and it means a house sort of, so that'll do for micro manor. Anyway, so that went on, and then I just started, so I just wanted to show you this. I was just doing a little detailing around the park, throwing some vending machines. Like I said, I just want more stuff at the side. And I really wanted a map, because you walk into a zoo, and really that's the first thing you're going to see, right? You want a big, I'm sure you've got a map in your hands as you walk around, but you see a big map printed out, labelled, so you know where to go. So you can kind of plan your route from there, and kind of, it kind of starts the zoo almost. And the game just does not have capabilities to make maps. It just doesn't have the option, really. I think you could probably do it using something you'll see in a second, if you were very, very patient. But I'm not. So what I wanted to do, and my current plan, it's not a good plan, but it is the current plan, is I'm using the globe and the sort of road layout of the DIN logo to kind of represent a map. I'm not going to pretend it's particularly effective, because it absolutely isn't. But this is something I think they'll add down the line. And in the meantime, this is what I'm going to do, basically. So I wanted to hide the sign as much as possible. And then I'm going to put some little dots on it, which is what I'm looking for now. I ended up going into decals for that as well, I believe. Yeah, there we go. And they're like the exhibits, basically, you know, marked on the map. So that's as good as it's going to get. Now, I think you could use decals and draw a map out, basically. I think it would take absolutely bloody ages. But I do think you could probably draw a map out using decals just like that. I am not going to do that. At least until I find a day where I'm very, very bored. But anyways, this is my map in the meantime. I think you maybe get the idea. Roughly, vaguely, possibly. Either way, it'll bloody do in the meantime. So hopefully that's something they add. We need more little park things, little info boards and display signs and stuff like that. It's tricky because it is a Jurassic World builder at the end of the day, but I think as soon as you add modular building, a lot of us are going to go more in this sort of direction. You know, they're going to go more realistic in their depictions of a zoo and stuff like that, and like what a modern one might look like. So rather than show you a bunch of things you've been watching for the entire video, we will nip into a park for the end of the video, and we're going to go forward, but we're not going to take a left, we're going to take a right, because of course we need to go meet our new Psittacosauruses, well, our now named Psittacosauruses. Thank you so much for all the suggestions, and of course, as per usual, there will now be another form down below if you want to name the 3 Microceratuses before the next video. So let's meet our, well, there we go, there's Joe. Joe is one of the more simple names we've got here. Joe is elderly as well. I've made sure they don't age. I don't think they should ever die, but it does concern me that I have this big elderly warning going on. But anyways, we've got Joe. We've got Taco, of course. The Google form lets me do something very cool. It lets me see which was the most commonly suggested answer. And Taco destroyed the other suggestions. We've got Pistachio over here. Hello, Pistachio. We've got Burrito over here. There's Burrito. We've got Peanut somewhere. There's Peanut hiding behind the tent over there. And somebody decided to ask a question that wasn't, well, it wasn't a name. Someone decided to ask, will your builds be on the workshop as part of the form? I've just noticed this and that makes me very sad. So that's, will your builds be on the workshop over there. Will your builds be on the workshop? My favourite of the Psittacosauruses. So let me know your name suggestions for the Microceratuses. We may add a couple more given their relatively low size. I think we might be able to get 5 or 6 in there and have it feel still pretty appropriate. So, you know, leave your suggestions, try to leave just one, and leave them on the form. Do not leave them in the comment section down below. I will not be using the comment ones, just to make sure it's fair. Everybody has the same access to the form, and it's nice and easy to see all the responses. So thank you very much for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. Next video, we're going to carry on down Conifer Corridor, and we're going to do something over here. We're going to go a little bit bigger. I've got a little bit of a thought. Until then, thank you very much for joining me. Cheers much as always. Bye-bye.
Road.